and I'll be watching that very, very closely. The next issue is taking it in a very different direction, is relates to the issue of antimicrobial resistance, and in particular the work that was done through the Expert Technical Advisory Committee on Antimicrobial Resistance more than a decade ago. Very comprehensive suite of recommendations, some of which were targeted at the TGA. Specifically, a recommendation number 9, which says that there should be the inclusion of microbial resistance safety data, including the propensity for promoting resistance and cross-resistance as a basic requirement of the assessment of all new antibiotics by the TGA. The implementation of a definition by a recognised authority of the threshold rates of resistance to human antibiotics, and the circumstances where usage should be investigated and mitigation procedures implemented. And the final part of that recommendation was the inclusion of national human antibiotic resistance prevalence data in the product information with a regular update every 5 years. What sort of work's been done by the TGA to advance those recommendations?
Can I put this in a bit of context, Senator? And given Senator Moore's suggestion that the Chief Medical Officer needs waking up occasionally, he can chip in here too. He is awake, I'm pleased to say it. Just checking, No. I was perhaps extending the meaning of your words, Senator, but he is awake, I'm pleased to say. The whole question of antibiotic resistance actually has a number of places that it's being dealt with in the broad context, and I'm happy for the TGA to answer in the narrow context of their particular piece. But as you would probably, or I hope you'd be aware, everything from the National Prescribing Service through to, and most particularly, the Safety and Quality Commission and the work that's being done there on this, I mean, the things that you're reading from, that is some time ago, and our work and our thinking, I think, has moved on quite significantly. And in fact, the Professor has done a significant amount of work on this, including in a global context. So just to give it context before I ask Dr. Skerritt, I might ask Professor Bagley just to give you a short burst. That was an instruction.
He can cover that. Chris Bagley, Chief Medical Officer. Senators, I think the key focus at the moment in relation to the whole issue of antimicrobial resistance is through a committee that's been endorsed now as part of the broader RMAC committee and subcommittee system, and the Antimicrobial Resistance Standing Committee, which is chaired by the manager of the Healthcare Associated Infection Program, Marilyn Cruikshank. The purpose of this body is the development of a national strategy, Senator, to minimise antimicrobial resistance, including supporting an integrative approach to the national strategy through coordination of national activities. And I think it's important, and I will cease after this bit, but to indicate that the membership of this committee brings together the sort of people that are really most important to develop such a strategy. So not only the Australian Commission on Safety and Quality in Healthcare, but the National Health and Medical Research Council, the National Prescribing Service, the Australasian Society for Infectious Disease, the Australian Society for Antimicrobials, the Australasian College for Infection Prevention and Control, Communicable Diseases Network Australia, Public Health Laboratory Network, the TGA, Pharmaceutical Benefits Advisory Committee, the Department of Health and Ageing, and the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority, as well as the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry through the Chief Veterinary Officer. So this is a group and this committee is a standing committee, the Australian Health Protection Principal Committee, which I chair and which reports straight to RMAC. And it is bringing together an understanding of the range of committees and work and activity that's been undertaken in the last decade. And work is well underway now for the development of this national strategy, and the sort of issues you raise there will need to be incorporated. And one of the issues is the coordination of national activities. There are a lot of activities that are happening but not well coordinated, Senator. So that's that's the key role of this committee. The only other point I would make, and this is one of the issues that is so important about antimicrobial resistance, there are not many new antibiotics being made. And that's our major concern, and the one major reason for that is when new antibiotics are made, resistance is developing now much more quickly than would have been 2 decades ago or longer.
Look, thank you.
So now Dr. Skerritt can go to some specifics.
Yep. I don't have all that much to add to Professor Bagley, but and as Professor's mentioned, there are very few new, sadly, there's very few new antibiotics that come through. There's more antifungals and antivirals. That's a global trend. With every new chemical entity, every new medicine, we actually require the development of a risk management plan. In the risk management plan for antibacterials, we specifically do have, among other issues of risk, we do include a focus on appropriate use and potential for resistance development. We also use the advice of both the Advisory Committee for Prescription Medicines and specifically the Advisory Committee for the Safety of Medicines when we do have new antimicrobials come through. So it is an integral part of our assessment, although you'll appreciate that it is at arm's length to the direct efficacy of the new medicine, but it's firmly built into the risk management plan.
Thank you for that. Just to follow up, I'm very aware of the new committee. I'm pleased it's been established, and I look forward to the report. I'm also aware that over a decade ago we had the establishment of a committee with similar expertise that came up with a very comprehensive suite of recommendations. Many of them ignored. And the concern I have is the concern that you've already expressed, Professor Bagley, in that there seems to be a complete lack of coordination in this area, that there have been a number of recommendations made to individual departments and areas within departments, but no process for ensuring that what was recommended over a decade ago has actually been followed through. And my concern applies to the current committee and what will come of that, and how we ensure that any of the recommendations made through their work are implemented. So I'm happy for you to take this on notice, but I'd like a very clear response to what the TGA has done to implement recommendation number 9 in the Jedikar report. And I've read those out to you, I won't read them again. And I'd like you to be able to tell me in detail about a response to each of those individual points outlined in recommendation number 9.
We'll take that on notice.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so the thing I would say to you, because it does go to the context and you ask about coordination, is with the formalisation under its own separate legislation of the Safety and Quality Commission. I mean, the whole point about the reform structures is to actually give us a series of institutions whose responsibility a number of these things are to make sure they are coordinated and that there is a very clear focus put on what happens with them. So that is why Safety and Quality Commission have been charged with this, and I accept your point and we'll come back to your notice in relation to these things, but I think we now got a clearer way to manage them.
I'll just respond to that and say part of the problem is that a large part of this area lies actually outside of health. It lies within the Department of Agriculture, Forestries and Fisheries. So it's not just a health issue. This goes much more broadly. Is the APVMA, the role that they play. This it runs across a number of departments, and so we need to get a coordinated whole of government approach. And I appreciate the Commission's role, but it does lie outside
and we
their
agree
mandate as well.
Yeah, we agree with that, Senator. And one of the things we are trying to do is actually make sure that there is a higher level of coordination across the portfolios. I mean, I constantly get asked this question about the use of antibiotics in agriculture, for example, and people's understanding, or lack of understanding more importantly, about what the current frameworks are, is something which clearly we have to do something about. So we're very aware of that issue.
I'll finish off with a question on registries, in particular National Joint Register. Has there been any work done to look at the development of registers across other high-risk implantable devices? And I'm thinking specifically about cardiac.
Yes, Senator, there has. This is actually not technically a question, it's a policy question, and therefore for the TGA. But I can tell you that we, for some time, have actually been doing quite a series of pieces of work about registers. The Safety and Quality Commission itself did some work on registries. When was it, Professor? It was
2008, 2009.
Yeah, 2008, 2009. That's something we're talking to government about. I think we all know from the experience of joint registration, I mean, that took a little while to get kicked off, but it's now actually incredibly useful. I think we all understand the merit of registries. And based on some of the work done by the Safety and Quality Commission, but then obviously with our experience in a number of areas, we are actively looking at this.
Can I get a sense of where it's going?
Look, because it's a policy process running inside government, you're asking me to predict the future, which I can't do, but what I can
ask you about the work that you're doing. That might be more
So what I
appropriate.
can tell you is that we've been looking at types of registries, how you might finance them, what might be the things that might be covered under those registries. So we're doing all of the proper policy due diligence you would expect in relation to that issue. Now, what will be our approach, ultimately, I can't predict, but I can tell you that work is getting a lot of senior attention.